Fernando, great to have you back on Investor Stream. I'd like to zero in, if I can, on the Andrade copper deposit to start, if I may. Now, with additional drilling planned for the back half of the year, you've alluded to the potential for expansion and even further resource upgrade in your recent presentation. What is it about the geology at Andrade that gives you that confidence?
Well, thank you for having me again, Alex. As I explained in the presentation, and I hope to go through this with a little bit more detail, the ore zone, it's essentially a rod shape. So you have this inner zone of high-grade material that's wrapped up by low-grade material. So the high-grade zones are discontinuous, and essentially because of lack of drilling. So if we target those zones and complete infill the high-grade zone, we will not only improve the average grade of the deposit, but we will improve the tons. And how do we do that? To be able to announce a resource, we go through all the calculations and all that. And at the end, we have to constrain or the resource into a conceptual pit that has obviously economic factors. So the better the average grade, the more tons or the deeper you can pull the conceptual pit, and will result in more tonnage to the deposit.
Okay, thanks, Fernando. So, as our listeners would be aware, you released the initial scoping study for Andrade back in March, which highlighted $108.1 million Australian post-tax NPV. At the time, you described the economic assessment as compelling. While the financials do seem to be pretty compelling on the surface, can you delve into what makes the Andrade deposit so compelling from an economic standpoint?
Well, it's essentially a combination of several factors. The first of all is that the deposit's very close to existing good quality infrastructure. To give you an example, we are 2.5 kilometers from paved roads that take us to the city of Caçapava, where we have our field office. Caçapava is a city that has been interacting with mining for many, many years. There are several limestone, ag lime mines active at currently. It has a geology and mines engineer school, so there's available high quality labor and trained people. You have everything related to mining services available in town. But not only this, the deposit then is near surface, which allows us to mine it in an open pit, truck and shovel, which is again lower cost, for example, compared to underground mining. And it keeps on going. The metallurgy, for example, helps a lot. So it's a combination of all these factors. Metallurgy, for example, high recoveries. The ore bearing mineral, the copper species is chalcocite, which is one of the richest copper species, carrying 80% copper. Not only this, it's amenable to heat, which allows us to go through a more effective and low-cost processing route that's called the XEW, which is solvent extraction and electrowinding. And the result of that is that we produce the final product, which is the copper cathode. That sits 250 kilometers from an international port. So all these things together result in a low capital cost of about 19 million Australian dollars, and an operational cost very low too, even as a very good operational margin of in excess of $6,000 per produced ton. And all these together return in the NPV you mentioned, and a rate of return in excess of 40%, which is really high for mining projects.
Finally, Fernando, you spent a considerable amount of time in your presentation talking up the potential of the Andrade Primavera corridor. In your mind, what is the upside along this 4-kilometre trend?
So, okay, the trend running from north to south starts with Andrade, and then we have this 4-kilometer trend and the Primavera at the end. Both ends, south and north of the trend. First of all, north we have the Andrade deposit, which already, as we know, has a resource outlined, and we're moving towards infill drilling and start the permitting process. Primavera, on the other hand, has very good trenching results at surface. So all this structure is potentially mineralized. Knowing this and suspecting this, we ran a reinterpretation of the ground geophysical data, which is essentially IP. IP is acronym for induced polarization. And what is that? It's a geophysical tool that helps us to map potential zones that contain sulfide essentially. So you shoot electricity in the ground, you see how it interacts with the rocks, and you collect the response at the other side. Within this 4 kilometers corridor, we had several anomalies that are potentially related to sulfide. Obviously, we need to drill test these to confirm or not, but the potential is very high.
Thanks for the update, Fernando, and all the best.
Thank you.